Good evening, everyone. On behalf of my entire Glenmark team, myself, Dr. Sagar Bhagat, I welcome you all. I sincerely express my gratitude towards your presence for this CME. Today, we'll be discussing the case-based approach in the management of COVID-19, especially focus on favipiravir as a molecule. Favipiravir, we all must be aware that we have started using this molecule from the month of June, and now that we have good amount of evidence, so we thought let's have this case-based approach in discussing that what is the best suitable case or the patient profiling which will be the best suited for favipiravir. And to do the same, we have with us some of the eminent figures which we all must be aware of. I take this opportunity to introduce them one by one. So we have the speaker and who is the moderator for today's event, Dr. Yuvarajan, who is the professor and head in the Department of Respiratory Medicine from SMVM CH Hospital. And to join him, we have panelists. So the first panelist who will also be presenting a case, that is Dr. Rahul Sharma, who is a senior consultant and interventional pulmonologist. Currently, he is the director and head of Lee Crest Hospital in Ghaziabad, Uttar Pradesh. We have Dr. Pooja Khosla, who is a senior consultant from the prestigious Sir Gangaram Hospital, Delhi. Dr. Apan Raj, who is the professor and head from the Department of Medicine from MAPIMS Hospital, Chennai. And Dr. Rahul Pandit, who is the senior intensive care consultant and the head of critical care at Fortis Hospital, Mulund, Mumbai. So on behalf of my entire team, I welcome everyone. Let me explain you the whole flow of the event. First, I will take some of the updates on favipiravir without going into much detail because favipiravir as a molecule is known to everyone. So what are the latest milestones in the favipiravir? I will take a short presentation on that. This will be followed by Dr. Yuvarajan's case-based presentation and moderation, and this will be followed by Dr. Rahul Sharma's case and moderated. So without wasting any time, I will start with the first part of today's session. That is a presentation and important update on favipiravir. So that's the agenda that I have just highlighted. The first part will be update on favipiravir, which will be followed by clinical cases by the experts, and followed by the panel discussion. And towards the end will be either be a case. Towards the end will be the audience questions. So favipiravir, you all must be aware that somewhere in the month of Feb, when the cases of COVID-19 started increasing in India, it was at that time when we, the R&D department of the Glenmark, started analyzing few molecules which will be of importance in the treatment of COVID-19. And finally, after analyzing many molecules, the favipiravir was selected, and we started developing the API internally in-house. So once the API was developed in the month of April, we approached the regulatory authority to start a clinical trial in India. And finally, on the 26th of April, we were given the approval from the DCGI to conduct clinical trial in the management of mild to moderate COVID-19 patients. So the patient enrollment started in the month of May, which continued towards the month of July. And meanwhile, when 150 patients was enrolled, the emergency drug approval was given to favipiravir in the management of mild to moderate COVID-19 patient in India. This was given in the 19th of June. So in the first week of July, the last patient which was enrolled got discharged. And towards the last week of July, we submitted the data of favipiravir to the regulatory authority. And based on which we have also drafted a manuscript, and it has been submitted to the peer-reviewed journal in the month of August. So we are soon expecting the publication, which will be glad to share to everyone. Just a small overview of favipiravir. We all know that it's a pyrazine carboxamide derivative, which is a prodrug which gets converted to an active form. And this favipiravir binds to the RNA-dependent RNA polymerase and prevents the most important step of DNA replication. It's an oral drug with a bioavailability of 97% and protein binding of 54%. The adverse effect, these are all of mild and transient in nature, but to name the few, the most common side effects are the gastrointestinal side effects like nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Few of the other side effects which are highlighted are increase in the blood uric acid level and liver transaminase. But all the side effects are of mild and transient in nature, and rarely we need a drug discontinuation for the same. A few contraindications. favipiravir is contraindicated in patients with severe renal impairment, severe hepatic impairment, pregnant female lactating, and those who are hypersensitive to favipiravir. The most important property of favipiravir is that it is not metabolized by CYP450 but by xanthine oxidase. This is important because many drugs which are being used in the treatment, they all are metabolized by CYP450. Hence, if an enzyme who has a different metabolizing enzyme, so there will be very less drug interaction seen. And the same is seen with favipiravir, that there are very rarely means very less drug-drug interaction seen with favipiravir as a molecule. It is indicated in mild to moderate COVID-19 disease. The recommended dose is 1800 milligram BD on day 1, followed by 800 milligram BD day 2 onwards to a maximum of 14 days. So the various dosage form, favipiravir, it is available in 200 milligram, 400 milligram tablet, and the latest one to launch is the 800 milligram tablet of favipiravir. With the launch of 800 milligram favipiravir, the pill burden has decreased to lowest. So the patient has to take only one tablet in the morning and one tablet in the evening as a dose from day 2 onwards. Highlighting about the teratogenic potential of favipiravir, early embryonic deaths were reported from the animal studies. Hence, favipiravir is contraindicated in pregnant females. Favipiravir is also contraindicated in childbearing females, lactating females. Hence, it is very important to rule out pregnancy in any female who is of childbearing age. It is only when the pregnancy test is negative, favipiravir can be prescribed. And not only during treatment, but the protection has to be taken 7 days after completing the treatment. The same protocol applies to men as well. While on treatment and 7 days after the treatment, you need to use the most effective contraceptive method with their partner. The regulatory authorities has made it mandatory to sign this informed consent form from the patient whenever we are prescribing favipiravir to any patient. This just gives you the detailed information that we have provided the pros and cons of the molecule to the patient, and after knowing that the patient agreed for using favipiravir. And so these were some of the important scientific updates of favipiravir. To highlight the few global update, Russia was the first country which has given approval to the use of favipiravir in mild to moderate COVID-19 patients. This was in the month of May. Followed by Russia, commercial approval was given by Saudi Arabia, UAE, Turkey, and Egypt. The commercial use of favipiravir was approved recently in Bangladesh. And the way it is approved for the emergency use in India, on the same line, it is also approved in countries like Italy, China, Iraq, Cambodia, and Kenya. Few of the states in India has also approved and involved favipiravir in the treatment protocol. There are around 18 clinical trials being conducted on favipiravir for its use in mild to moderate COVID-19 disease. Not only the trials are conducted for the treatment, but there is one trial which is being conducted in Canada where the use of favipiravir as a prophylaxis treatment in the prevention of COVID-19 infection is also being carried out. This will be a trial which will give us an idea about the use of molecule in the prophylactic measure to prevent COVID-19. The states of Maharashtra, Orissa, Assam, Karnataka has involved favipiravir in the state treatment protocol in the management. To highlight, in Maharashtra, the molecule is approved in the use of mild to moderate COVID-19 disease. Mild cases, those who are symptomatic without any comorbidity, those who are symptomatic with comorbidity, and those who have pneumonia without respiratory failure, whose SpO2 is more than 93, SpO2 more than 60, and respiratory rate less than 20. Also, apart from this states like Gujarat, states of Punjab has adapted favipiravir in their protocol. The latest trial, which was updated on the use of favipiravir, was conducted from Russia, where the data from phase 2/3 multicentric randomized controlled trial was highlighted, where the patients were randomized in 3 arms. In the 3 arms, 2 different doses of favipiravir was compared: 1600 milligram BD on day 1, followed by 600 milligram BD day 2 onwards. The second dose was the one which is currently approved in India, that is 1800 milligram BD on day 1, followed by 800 milligram BD day 2 onwards. And the third arm was standard of care. The endpoints of the study was to see the viral clearance and also the symptom reduction. So the study clearly highlights that those patients who were on favipiravir show significantly better and earlier viral clearance as compared to those who were on standard of care. And amongst the two doses, the one with 1600 milligram BD on day one showed around 43% achievement of the viral clearance as compared to 80% of the patient on 1800 milligram BD who were given as a standard dose. Also, the symptoms, this was significantly cured better earlier in patients who were prescribed favipiravir in the treatment. Recently, this study from phase 3 trial from Japan was also published, which has also highlighted findings on the similar line. Those patients who were treated with favipiravir showed significantly better and the earlier improvement as compared to those who were on the placebo arm. The ICU admission rate was compared from a study conducted in Istanbul, and it also highlighted findings that are very encouraging for the molecule, that the use of favipiravir, when the favipiravir molecule was started using, the rate of ICU admission decreases significantly as compared to that stage when the favipiravir as a molecule was not. We have also this data presented from the Indian study conducted by Dr. Agam Vora and Mangesh Tivaskar, who has highlighted data of 54 patients of mild to moderate COVID-19 cases positive with RT-PCR. The drug was well tolerated. Few side effects in the form of loose motions were reported, but all the side effects were of self-limiting and transient in nature, which does not require any discontinuation of the drug. Of the 54 patients, 52 patients were cured well. 2 patients required to be admitted in ICU and required other therapy in the form of remdesivir and tocilizumab. Review article was recently been published. It was authored by Dr. Umang Agarwal, Dr. Zarir Udiadwala, who has highlighted similar findings where the use of favipiravir was well tolerated. The study conducted on Indian patient was also showed a significant improvement in time to clinical recovery. The main advantage of favipiravir was the oral dosage form and who can be given to patients who are symptomatic and who are not hospitalized. The side effect profile, as highlighted in the review article, state that it is mild and transient in nature. Side effect most commonly reported was hyperuricemia and increase in the liver amines. The top line results of Indian clinical trial highlighted that the use of favipiravir significantly statistically reduced the time to clinical cure in the overall population. As early as 70% of the patient reported clinical cure on the 4th day of the treatment. 2/3 subject achieved viral clearance on the first week. Almost 30% faster viral clearance was achieved in the overall population. The requirement of oxygen was delayed in the arm where favipiravir was used. There was no mortality in the arm where favipiravir was treated. There were no side effects which leads to drug discontinuation, and there was no unexpected or new adverse event which were reported as compared to those who are highlighted in the previous study. So the Indian clinical trial has established evidence of safety and efficacy of favipiravir in the treatment of mild to moderate COVID-19. So with this, I end my presentation, and I would like to switch on to the second part of our agenda, that is clinical case discussion by the experts. So for this, I invite Dr. Yuvarajan to present his case and moderate the case discussion. Dr. Yuvarajan, over to you, sir.
Okay, that was a nice overview from Dr. Sagar regarding use of favipiravir, one of the most important challenging drug, because even though we have mixed responses from various physicians all over India. I'm going to discuss two interesting cases where we use favipiravir and we found that it's so much effective. These two cases, because we are using antiviral drugs for some patients, for most of the patients, I'm going to discuss with you these two different cases, which is somewhat peculiar in their presentation. At the same time, these patients have significant comorbidities along with a moderate grade of moderate pneumonia. So in those cases, I think definitely there is a role of favipiravir. So that I'm going to discuss that to you in detail. Okay, this is the first case. This is a 2-year-old male who is a known case of COPD. He's under long-term follow-up with me for the past 3 to 4 years. He's a stable COPD patient, not having significant exacerbations the past 1 or 2 years. So he presented with the chief complaints of fever for 5 days, generalized malaise for 5 days, and cough which is aggravated for the past 3 days. He was having cough on and off, but it's not so much troublesome. But for the past 3 days before the presentation, he was having such a dry, irritating, hacking cough was there, particularly in the late night and early morning. So that was a presentation from that old man. So on probing the history further, the fever was for the past 3 days, which is of low grade, not associated with chills and rigors. And he also presented with a cough for 3 days, which is of dry cough. There is no specific character of cough, but it was, like continuous bouts of cough. The severity is more. He could not even lie down in the night time. That was the description from the patient side. As I already told you, the patient is a known case of COPD on treatment with LABA/LAMA, metadose inhaler, with a valve spacer under regular follow-up with me. He received all the vaccination as per the current guidelines and protocols. He's a known hypertensive for the past 20 years on medications. He's not a known diabetes mellitus or not a known ischemic heart disease patient. So this patient presented with a known COPD patient along with hypertension. He presented to us with the 5 days history of fever along with cough, along with generalized malaise. So any patient at this time presented with the fever, we should always think of COVID-19 as one of the diagnostic possibility, but it is not so. There are some other differential diagnoses also we should consider in all the patients who present fever. So as we are in the pandemic season, so I suspected COVID-19 is one of our first differential diagnosis. So I proceeded with the further investigation. As you know that these are the different presentations. You may get a fever. Most of the times, as per my experience, most of the times this patient presents the fever, and fever is usually of low grade fever. Very rarely I'm getting this fever with chills and rigors. So usually of around 100 to 99 to 100 Fahrenheit temperature was there. And at the same time, they also present sometimes with chills, and myalgia is typical symptom that is present in young individuals. And anosmia and this ageusia also in almost like 10 to 20% of my cases, particularly those who are educated population, particularly the medicos who presented to us with COVID-19 symptoms. They presented with only anosmia and ageusia. And of course, this shortness of breath and difficulty in breathing is only in severe and critical cases of COVID-19. And most of the times it is hardly less than 5%. In my experience also, it is very less once you pick up this case early. If the case presents very late directly to the casualty, of course, definitely shortness of breath and all these things we are seeing. And sore throat definitely is a non-specific symptom, even though it is included as one of the symptom in COVID-19. Isolated sore throat as a presentation for COVID-19, I have not seen much of cases because sore throat is very common in flu when compared to this COVID-19. These were the data from IDP that was published some 2-3 months back. Most of the cases present fever and cough and sore throat around 10%, breathlessness 8%, weakness and running nose was there in the presentation. So how the clinical course of COVID-19, usually how it progresses. So usually after an incubation period of median period of around 5.1 days. So the symptom onset will be after 5 days, the patient will present the fever or any other symptoms, whatever I told in the previous slide. And usually in the acute mild phase, 5 to 10 days will be there. And this is the time that, second week is very crucial for a young immunocompetent host from the 7th day to 11.5 days. This is a very crucial period. So this patient may worsen and his lung injury can worsen. It can progress to severe form of pneumonia. It can progress to ARDS in coming days and weeks. But this is common in young and immunocompetent hosts. Whereas in immunocompromised hosts, when the patient who are old age, debilitated individuals and the patient on immunosuppressives and patients who is a known COPD on inhaled corticosteroids and all these things. So these patients can progress very rapidly. And I think picking up the case of COVID-19 at the early phase is so important so that you can easily guide the therapy. At the same time, you can easily monitor the patient to prevent their complications. Even though there are some cases like hardly less than 5% of cases, you can't do anything, but still you can arrest the progression with all the available armamentarium that what we have now in our current practice. So coming on to our case, on examination, the patient was febrile, as SpO2 was around 96% in room air. He's not very tachypneic or not using axillary muscles. He was a stable COPD. He was very comfortable except for the fever and hacking cough that irritated him for the past 3 days before presentation. On auscultation, only the findings of COPD, only bilateral reduced blood sounds, vesicular blood sounds, no adventitious sounds was here. Other systems are within normal limits. So this was the guidelines that I prepared for my institute. Like the crucial thing that you need to do for all the patients with COVID-19, as far as my experience is concerned, is that you need to pick up the case that can worsen in future, because we can't treat the case in a same way like as we are having a we are not having a clear-cut idea nowadays. So those individuals who are having high risk of progression, these individuals has to be picked up early, and antiviral therapy has to be instituted, and all the markers has to be frequently assessed, so that to prevent the progression, that is very crucial. So this was based on the comorbidities: age more than 60, the patient has a known case of coronary artery disease or CKD, patients are known diabetes mellitus, especially the patient with poorly controlled diabetes. Very, very important. You need to ask specifically, if he is a diabetic patient, if the patient is not adequately controlled of their sugar level with the available medicines, or sometimes they may take an alternative form of therapy. They would have stopped all the medicines because of because of COVID-19 fear. These people lost their follow-up with regular doctors. So these patients take all the form of therapy, and most of the patients at the time of presentation, they have a very poor, poorly controlled HbA1c. I feel that poorly controlled diabetes is one of the most important marker for progression of disease. At the same time, these patients, after 1 week, they present with a more severe form of pneumonia and they succumb early. So these patients has to be catched early. And chronic respiratory disease, particularly those patients, COPD, asthma, bronchiectasis, and ILD, all the patients who are already on treatment. And this point is very important. Those patients who are on regular therapy, who are under regular follow-up with the doctors, like with the pulmonologist. So these patients are not worsening, as far as my experience is concerned, because those patients who are not having adequate follow-up, those patients who are not having a good control of their own disease, these patients having a very rapid progression of the disease, that we need to take care of that. And chronic liver disease, patient who is a known autoimmune disease or conditional disorders, patient with malignancies and with or without treatment of chemotherapy, post-transplant patients, and obese individuals, particularly morbid obese individuals, these patients have high risk of progression of disease, and these patients has to be monitored properly, and the markers has to be checked frequently to prevent the progression. And these are the clinical parameters that indicates the poor prognosis. Tachypnea, hypoxemia, tachycardia, hypotension, altered sensorium at the time of presentation, very, very important. And lab parameters like lymphopenia. As you know, the lymphocytes is one of the important cellular marker for combating the virus. So lymphopenia is one of the important, good, reliable marker for most of the patients. And you can calculate NL ratio more than 17. That is also one of the worst prognosis. Any patient who are having acute inflammatory marker elevation, CRP at the baseline more than 100 milligram per DL, or patients with ferritin more than 300 microgram per ml, or patient having D-dimer more than 1000 nanogram per ml, or LDH more than 450. We don't often do LDH because LDH is non-specific one. We often do the CRP, ferritin, and D-dimer in our setup. And of course, I see the CT scan also at the time of presentation. Even though most of the guidelines are not recommended that, because CT scoring is not directly correlating with the patient's symptoms. But still, there are certain findings in the CT at the time of presentation that can just tell you that this patient may worsen, even though at the time, if you see the saturation is around 96 or 98, but that is not going to help with most of the patients. A patient who presents with pleural effusion, unexplained pleural effusion, moderate pleural effusion, not explained by any other factors, like that is one thing. And second thing, presence of crazy pavement pattern. These two factors is another thing. And at the time of presentation, if the CT score is higher, like what for example, if you're taking a score of 40, if the score is somewhere around more than 20, like you need to just take care properly, because this patient may worsen suddenly with hypoxemia. So that is also another thing. Even though it is not having good correlation with the clinical symptoms, but still you need to take care of this patient very sincerely to just save their lung in future. So coming on to my case, after all this presentation, so I advised for RT-PCR testing and other investigations. So the RT-PCR testing, as I expected, that SARS-CoV-2 RT-PCR is detected. So with the diagnosis of COVID-19 pneumonia with COPD was the diagnosis for this patient. So now next question is that whether to admit this case or not, because the patient is stable except for the fever, except for the cough. Actually, one thing I want to just tell you is that the patient having a hacking cough, that is also one of the worst signs that you see, according to my experience, because any COVID-19 patient who is having a chronic, who is having a cough, acute cough, which is worsen day by day, and it is irritable cough, that shows that its involvement in the small airways, its involvement in the alveoli, and involves the interstitium. So that shows the severity of involvement. Indirectly, by the clinical symptom only, you can judge that this patient will worsen. So this patient, I have a dilemma whether to put this patient. Definitely, this patient is age more than 60, having a COPD comorbidity. At the same time, the patient is having a COVID-19 or PCR positive. It's better to admit this case. But even though I just insisted admission for this fellow, but he just denied admission, I got undertaking from him because we need to monitor the patient. As I already told you, any patient with comorbid illness like COPD and all these features, definitely we need to closely monitor the patient for progression. But this fellow denied admission, and so with this undertaking, I just gave advice for home-based care. This was the investigation advised on the day one, like CBC. So which after on the next day, I got a report as TC around 6,600 cells and neutrophils. Everything is, and lymphocytes on the lower side, like almost like less than 20%. But NL ratio is not significantly elevated, and platelets around 1.9 lakhs. And inflammatory markers, CRP around 15, D-dimer is around 0.2 nanogram per DL, and ferritin is around 235. See, you can ask, so the patient is having a milder form of disease. He's not having hypoxemia, having room as such 96. And you can ask one question: why you did inflammatory markers? I'm just telling you one thing. No guidelines is clear cut in this issue because nobody can assess the progress of the disease. There are different markers are there. There are different studies are there. But still, this patient, I told you, those patients who are having high risk of progression, whatever thing I told, that individuals need to be taken care of properly, because that patient, at least one baseline inflammatory marker will give you a clue definitely that this patient may worsen or this patient become sick. That's why I did a DDMR. At the same time, this patient already have a risk factor. COPD itself is a risk factor for developing all the thrombotic events. It's a systemic disease, not like a lung disease. So you may get all risk of thrombosis. That's why always better to do a DDMR. So it's not that the patient is not having hypoxemia. You don't have to do all these things. It's not like that. So you have to just do all these things to just make sure that the patient is saved from this terrible disease. So after that, I just did a chest radiology. So as once again, this is the thing that I prepared for this institute, that the protocol that what we practice at the time of admission for mild disease. You do CBC, RBS, and sugar level, because I told you those patients who are having poorly controlled diabetes mellitus, these patients have a high risk of progression. That's why this has to be done. And ECG has to be done. And HbA1c if the patient is diabetic, because to see the status of the sugar for the past 2 to 3 months. So how is that? And D-dimer must, because at least even mild disease, D-dimer at least for selected individual, not for all the people. I can't do D-dimer for just 20 to 30 year individual who are not having any risk factors. But that patient, if they are having any risk factor for thrombosis, for that matter, if COPD or any form of disease, so definitely D-dimer has to be done at least one baseline. If you are starting on tablet favipiravir for mild disease, definitely you need to do RFT, LFT, as we are discussing that there's a transient elevation of liver enzymes. At the same time, there is a transient elevation of uric acid. I have not personally seen hyperuricemia causing gouty arthritis in any of my patients, not even a pain also. So marginal elevation of uric acid was there in some other patient. You see, you do a follow-up after 7 days, this uric acid. So I have not seen any cases with arthritis with pain. And moderate case, as I discussed, you can do a NL ratio. You can do a lymphocyte CRP ratio. I used to do for some selected cases, lymphocyte CRP ratio, LFT, RFT, RBS, same thing, X-ray PA view. So X-ray PA, actually I'm telling you, X-ray PA view, if you are doing like, if the patient can't be shifted, so always better to do a CT. You can see the, involvement of lobes and, lung is, will give a better, view about the disease when compared to X-ray, because X-ray will show two-dimensional view. And if the patient cannot be shifted, definitely X-ray PA can give the solution. And definitely for all the moderate cases, you do all the inflammatory markers. And if you are thinking of bacterial co-infections, better to do a baseline procalcitonin levels, and must is troponin INT, just to see the myocarditis. Because COVID can also involve myocardium. So in that case, sometimes what will happen, you may have a myocarditis also. So at least for the baseline troponin INT, you can do it. ABG, definitely the patient is having hypoxemia You can do at least one baseline ABG, and based on the patient's POT level, then decision you can just take whether to when to repeat the next ABG and all. Blood culture, if the patient is having a sign of leukocytosis or any forms of 1 second, sorry. Okay, and interleukin 6, if you are planning for tocilizumab, if you want, like there are a lot of other centers where interleukin 6 is not being commonly done. If you are planning for this thing, tocilizumab, you can do that. And severe critical patients, same thing. You can do echo also, bedside echo in that case, because sometimes sudden cardiac death is also very common in COVID-19 patients. We are seeing a couple of cases, so that's why. So it's always better. And the patient is, if they're critically ill, you can do a serum lactate as a part of protocol for most of the patients with patients severe ARDS. Okay, as I already discussed, this man, I just insisted for admission, just for to have a good follow for him, but he denied, and he insisted us for a home-based care. So let's have a look at his CT picture, because why I'm discussing this case, because he's old, he's having comorbid illness. I use favipiravir. You see his CT and let me know what new finding you are seeing. You see that? You see. You see, this is the emphysematous bulla in the left side is having. There's a known case of COPD on that. You can see the Schaber-Sheath trachea. You can see this elongated, U-shaped trachea. That is one of the sign of COPD that you see. And you can see here, there is a ground glassing with a patch of consolidation is there. And you see, this one finding is, I just want to show you, which is not very commonly you see in a COVID-19 CT. You see that this, 1 second, I'll just pen mark that. There are peripheral consolidation where you could see the micro cavities. Actually, cavity you don't see usually in a case of COVID-19, particularly in the acute phase of disease. Here, this patient, I'll just stop that at the time. You see that there are certain areas, you can see the cavitation. Here, even that also, there are some cavitation areas that are there. So, that area. So this patient is having a peripheral consolidation, basal airspace opacity. In that consolidation, peripheral consolidation, you could see a micro cavities. So that's why, these patients, along with that, I discussed with the radiologist how common you see this type of peripheral consolidation along with cavity. The common presentation what we see is that's a ring consolidation. You see all the vascular signs. You see the patchy GGOs and peripheral GGOs and peripheral ground glassing. And old case, you see the linear strands and all these things, interstitial thickening. But this type of cavity is very rare in patients with COVID. As I just discussed, I showed a bulla with the peripheral consolidation patch here as ground glassing. A typical finding that what we noted in this case is the presence of small cavities, which is what we usually won't see in a patient. That the cavity is also very small in this patient with COVID-19. This I think everybody knows that this is the grouping that we used to do for differentiation of the patient. The patient asymptomatic, I will call it as a pre-symptomatic. Most of the patients, they are telling asymptomatic, it's pre-symptomatic. When you follow up the case at the end of end of the week, they are having at least some form of symptoms. They have generalized malaise, they have a myalgia, at least some more symptoms are there. And group B is a symptomatic patient with a mild to moderate pneumonia with no signs of severe disease, with SpO2 around somewhere just maintaining around 90-94, and group C is a severe pneumonia. And this is the same thing classification. Okay, how we manage the case, because we insisted admission, but that this fellow denied admission. So based on all the markers, so he's not having any elevation of this acute inflammatory markers. DDMR is well within normal limits. But patient was started on favipiravir on day 7 of his illness as per his history. And favipiravir started as per the protocol, 1800 milligram twice daily on day 1, and followed by 800 milligram twice daily from day 2. And he was also started on broad spectrum oral antibiotics, and definitely low molecular heparin was also started. 40 milligrams subcutaneous once daily, because this patient have all the hospitalized patient and all the patients with comorbidities. I feel that definitely low molecular heparin, at least a prophylactic dose has to be given for all the patients. And most of the patients, those patients who are having a higher oxidants, for example, those patients who are having a chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or those patients who are having a recurring higher amount of oxygen, or those patients who are on moderate to severe disease. This is the protocol that I'm just following. I'm just using N-acetylcysteine in higher doses for the anti-oxidant property, 600 milligram TDS, along with other supportive drugs, zinc and vitamin C. And if the patient is having a very irritating and hacking cough was there. So that was, I was more worried about that, because that's why I just took a CT for him, because, because those patients who are having a worsened cough, they have a very bad city. So indirectly you can just assess that. Because, so here I used to only the levodopa because most of the times as a pulmonologist we used to prefer the cough syrup which is having a peripheral action, not like a central action. These are the syrup preparation which acts in the peripheral cough receptors that doesn't cause much of sedation and too much of disturbance for the patients. On third day, there was no fever spikes. He was having a fever spikes, repeated fever spikes, like until 7th day. So 7th day. So on third day after initiation, he was not having any fever spikes. On 5th day, almost all his symptoms recovered. Myalgia and generalized malaise was improved. And throughout the period, he was maintaining saturation of 96. And every day, see, I have just insisted him. If you are not doing if you are not getting admitted, at least every day you have to do a teleconsultation with me. So he agreed with that, and he followed with the everyday teleconsultation with me. And I also advised to continue the inhaler, whatever he was taking. So he was taking a LABA combination. So that also he was continuing. And repeat test swab was done on 5th day after initiation of fiber. It is reported as negative. So that was a very good case. I was just thinking because the same type of patient I've seen in COPD patient like that. So those patients actually without any antivirals, without the thing, these patients have some worsened illness, have a prolonged fever and all these things. Comparatively, this chap has this old man has fever has come down in 3rd day only. On 5th day only, he got symptomatically improved without any hospital admission. So he got a good improvement. That's one of the things that to be noted. This is a case number 2. This is also a very different case. That's what.
Sir.
So this is a 50-year-old.
Yeah. Sir, one sec. So before moving to the next case, can we have in case if discussion if all I invite all the panelists for discussion on this beautiful case what you have presented by Dr. Yuvraj and some of the atypical features on CT scan. So I invite all the panelists. If you have any question to Dr. Yuvarajan to be asked or any point which need to be discussed on the case that was presented by sir. So the forum is open for discussion.
One thing I forgot, this cavity also I just ruled out. I was just thinking initially the cavity is because of septic emboli, because the peripheral nodular appearance. Okay, so we did a blood culture also. Even we did actually I was about to do sputum also culture to rule out other bacterial. I did a baseline procalcitonin also to rule out bacterial cause for that. The typical that microcavities, everything is negative. Procalcitonin quantity levels also within normal limits. Every culture is negative. Really, I just want to do a bronchoscopy for him because I don't know, I don't know about other panelists here. How common this microcavities that you see in a peripheral consolidation in a COVID-19 pneumonia?
So I think
I just want to ask Dr. Rahul Sharma sir, have you seen any case sir like this? Like a consolidation with just cavities very typical, like bubbling, like what you see in a bronchiectasis, like grouped thing, rounded one. So have you encountered any case?
I think first of all, I would congratulate you for such a wonderful case. Regarding this cavity, we have seen a few cases in which the consolidation is little larger, but most of the time what they are developing some kind of bronchiectasis, which looks like cavity, and most of the time when we see the CT films, we are also confused and we run away to our radiology console and see. But in this case, I'm a little curious because patient has paraseptal as well as centilobular emphysema. So when the pneumonia develops in such kind of emphysemas, then most of the time we see such kind of cavitatory lesion inside the pneumonia. But again, it is very, very difficult because the picture quality is not coming that beautiful on the in this podium, but that is one of the DD. And recently I'll be presenting that case, that the relative of that case. We have one case in which we have sequential CTs and we have seen that the patient has developed a large bronchocele. So initially we were suspecting that that patient might have some associated superimposed gram-positive infection, some kind of positive infections. But later on we have realized, and we have consulted so many radiologists also, it comes out that because of the weakness of lung, there is a large bronchocele that has developed. So yes, there are few cases in which we do see such kind of diseases and atypical presentation. But I think in this COVID season, we have to go with the common scenarios first. And as everyone is learning day by day with these cases, our learning is increasing every day.
Yeah, today also, sir. Today also, one case actually that's a post-COVID, almost like severe form of pneumonia, gone into a phase of HFNO. You got recovered. and now he's on oxygen support. We followed up serial CT. Initial CT has around 1 or 2 bulla. He was a known case of COPD, 1 or 2 bulla. But after 6 weeks to 8 weeks after our recovery, now we got the full of lung, almost like more than 30-40% is large bullas were there.
So
That's a
we have also
post-COVID,
seen
yeah.
2 patients who presented as pneumothorax after
Okay.
recovery from COVID. So
Okay.
probably these patients are developing some kind of peripheral bullas or cyst or something like that, which is rupturing and causing such kind of presentation to these patients. But yes, it is all an evolving phase and evolving learning right now. So we can't
Yes,
really
sir.
comment that what actually is happening. So the basic theory that I can understand, that if the patient has long-term disease or some kind of underlying lung disease prior to that, then this particular portion of the lungs got more weaker and it gets dilated and sometimes ruptured. That is what my own personal theory, but I don't know
Yeah.
what exactly is happening to these lungs.
So what about you? You all agree with the decision? Actually, I just insisted this fellow, considering he is having already a bulla, known case of COPD. Last almost 2 years, he was not having any exacerbation. He was managed as per the current protocol and guidelines. So, but actually, worsening cough, old man with a severe COPD, having a FeV1 of around 40% baseline. 40 to 50% baseline, and he got a COVID-19 with patch in the lung when he presents. So what he feels that definitely it has to be admitted. Yeah, like I just told him, but he
So
he was not
absolutely,
agreeing
because
for admission. Yeah.
so there are so many patients that we are facing each and every day. Because my saturation is all right, I am not going to
Ah.
admit. And 3 days later, these patients comes in frank pneumonias. So this is the scenario, I think, everywhere, because guidelines are, so I believe, this is my personal opinion again, that the guidelines are slightly misleading when we are totally relying on our saturation, which will not go down till the time our 30 to 40% of lung is
Yes, sir.
involved.
Yes, sir.
So
Yeah.
everyone is relying on saturation, but saturation is probably a very late marker of your disease. Rather than doing a CT in patients, especially such kind of patients who are having persistent cough or any kind of localized respiratory symptoms,
Yeah.
probably early detection and early therapy is the best way to treat such kind of patients.
Yeah, look,
And regarding some of my friends also, sir, like I think I will ask Apanraj. Some of my friends when they were discussing like like antiviral therapy, why we are just so insisting, because we have a mixed response from almost all over the world. But I was just more in favor of antiviral therapy from the beginning only, either in the form of favipiravir or remdesivir, because at present we are having whether it is working at least 30 to 40%, we can give that benefit. Particularly the patient comes early. But I feel that, sir, if you are catching that patient, ideal patient, early, and you are giving to the patient, I feel that it is definitely preventing their progression. That's what my experience is. At the same time, early recovery, at the same time, the shedding of virus also, that viremia also is reduced. So a chance of infection is also very less, because many of my friends used to ask me, sir, why you are asking for favipiravir for even for young patient. For a young patient, I used to give to their choice only. Mainly for comorbid illness, mainly for those patients with risk of progression, antiviral therapy, early period, I'm just insisting, sir. What about your view, sir? Apanraj and Rahul Sharma, sir. Yes, sir.
Sir, actually, it's a wonderful presentation, sir. I was very happy to hear your presentation. First of all, I want to add 2 or 3 points. Nowadays, the symptoms are very, very minimal, sir. Only headache, just not able to take food. So these patients can land up with complications later. I have catched more than 3 or 4 patients who landed up like that. And after 1 week, they will come with the saturation of 54%, and they will be coming by walking. So happy hypoxia. So, and the next day we can hear the news that they died outside itself without doing the test also. We are practicing a little bit outer, no? So this type of things are happening. Okay, so this patient, from my concern, he has to be admitted. You have correctly pointed out, but this is person's wish. And nowadays, actually, the fear of COVID has gone totally. Especially, I don't know about other states, especially in Tamil Nadu, it is totally gone. And nowadays, nobody is getting admitted. Those patients who are coming to us are very late. And in our hospital, we have seen almost more than 1,800 COVID cases till now. And nowadays, only patients who are in need of oxygen, who are in need of ICU only are coming. But in clinic, we are seeing more and more cases which tend to be COVID, but they are not willing for the test. Previously, they used to do. So in those time, we had very good chance of using favipiravir. Almost we have used in more than 600 patients in our hospital. Retrospective study I want to do actually. But most of the patients whom we have started, when you compare with the control, they are not progressed the way in which they progressed before use of antivirals, both favipiravir and remdesivir, and the amount of people who shifted to ICU from the mild to moderate cases has reduced. Has reduced significantly. That I want to say. So I also of SAS choice only, and this age and other things, I don't think it's very right time, and we are not that much having enough data to say age may not be a factor. And I have seen many people who died below 40 years also in spite of the
yes.
treatment. And so we have to do investigations like what Saras did: D-dimer, serum ferritin, CRP. And we used to do every third day or fourth day if the patient wants home isolation. So, and we'll be following it up, and definitely they have a prognostic significance. So
even for classification also, sir, that from MOH classification also, that was not, like it is confusing actually. They are telling a mild disease means restricted to, asymptomatic, pre-symptomatic, or symptoms having fever with URTA. I'm telling that most of the case of COVID pneumonia, most of the case of COVID-19 case, if you are doing retrospectively CT, because nowadays people are marketing CT scan as one of the diagnostic choice. I think in all the states, I think you may get that problem. They are coming with a CT and are asking whether they are having what they are having. Okay, most of the patients having some form of patch in the lung. I feel that COVID-19 is actually a low respiratory disease. If you retrospectively see, the patient has mild symptoms also, at least some form of patch will be there. So that case, that in that situation, I don't know whether to put this as a mild, moderate. Actually, any form of pneumonia is considered, should be considered as a moderate thing only.
Moderate, yes, sir.
Agreed. Completely agree. Completely agree. I think we are actually getting carried away with the CT scans.
Yes,
And that's not the way we should be looking at. I mean, many times these radiologists have come out with this scoring system, which is actually detrimental. People are trying to
Yes,
treat
sir.
the CT scan rather than treating the patient. That is the problem.
Yes,
One
yes.
of the things which
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
Yuvarajan I would like to comment upon, and which is a very simple thing, and I like to promote that quite a lot, is to
Yeah.
do a 6-minute walk test for patients who are at home.
Yeah.
So you combine that with your CRP every third day.
Yeah.
You will be able to catch your patients before they become hypoxic at rest.
Yes,
And
actually,
before
I
they
have
actually
not.
enter the
I have not
hypoxia.
included, sir. Regularly, we are doing. Like,
Yeah.
I ask them every day to do.
You ask
Like
them to do it every
both
day.
on exertion also. Yeah, yes, sir.
And that is a very good way of actually separating out the patients who are likely to become hypoxic. And
Yes,
if
sir.
they fail the 6-minute walk test, they should not be given an option of home quarantine. They
Yes,
have
sir.
to be
Sir,
in a hospital.
that is the mark, sir. Like most of the times, I used to tell the same thing. SpO2 just seeing for just a second, and they are telling that I'm now in 96. Okay, after walking for a few steps, they feel breathless, and if they see the saturation, so always definitely, I'm just doing 6-minute walk test daily, sir. Actually, I have not
Yeah.
included that. I don't know.
Yeah,
I just forgot.
that's a very important point. And even 3 minutes for patients like yours who is elderly with COPD, even 3 minutes might be okay for him to actually desaturate if at all he desaturates. So,
Yeah.
and coming to the peripheral shadows and bulla formation,
Yeah.
I think it is actually, if you look for it, you will see it in many patients as well. So probably the fact that we are not looking very early into the CT scan, we are looking, or we are not doing the CT for a long time, and by the time we do it, the disease is quite widespread. But the reason for that is not known. We have seen it in few patients where we have caught it right in the middle of the disease. So 7th, 8th day, if you do a CT, you'll probably see some bullous formations out there.
But this one it's like a micro cavity, a small one, like what you see in a case of like NTM. So usually NTM you get a micro cavity, typical upper lobe. So like that it was there. I asked repeated radiology whether it is communicated with the bronchus, whether it is having any connection. I also thought the same thing, sir. Whether underlying emphysematous portion that is there, like central lobe emphysema, that is infected. They told that it is like a cavity only. So maybe in follow-up CT, I asked for a follow-up CT. Maybe we get a good idea of that.
Yep. All the best. Great.
Yes. Yeah.
Ma'am, any comment from you on
No,
the case? Yes, ma'am.
it's a really good case, and I congratulate you for managing it OPD basis. I would have thought
Admitted.
twice before doing all that. But surely it has been managed very well, and I'm not sure if you've used steroids in this patient. And this second a comment I would like to make, I definitely agree with you that starting antivirals right in time, we can control the situation better. And before it goes on to inflammatory phase, antivirals do have a significant role. And this option is a very good option, especially OPD basis.
And Yuvraj sir,
I move on.
most of the connective tissue disorders patients are really doing well. I don't know how. We have seen about
This point actually, I want to just share, like those patients who are having chronic respiratory disease, who are under good control with a physician or pulmonologist, these patients are escaping from the progression. That's what I just seen. I don't know whether it is because of complex immunological response, or it's because of inhaled steroids the patient is taking for long duration. I don't know that. The same thing like with even this
patients who are under very good diabetic control, who are under very good hypertension control, and regular drugs on CAD are doing better than people who are presenting with the 11 HbA1c, 12 HbA1c. And autoimmune diseases and connective tissue disorders, and we have seen some 7 to 8 patients, and none of them had even severe form of disease. But it may not be a good numbers. I think others' experience will be helpful for them.
We've seen a few connective tissue disorders in these patients who are basically taking up some of these so-called antiviral therapies as their routine thing, do come up and do have critical illness as well. But I agree with Dr. Yuvarajan's point that if you are under a doctor's care as a regular part and your comorbidities are controlled, so it is not a controlled comorbidity which is a problem, it is an uncontrolled comorbidity which is the problem. If your comorbidity is controlled, you're probably better off, and you may not be allowed to progress because your doctor is good, not because of anything else. And and the motto should be, if you want to use a medicine for a bacteria, you use antibiotic. For a virus, you should use antiviral, not anti-parasitic medication like ivermectin or anti-malarial medicine like chloroquine.
Anti-malarial, yes, true.
Okay,
So how do you
Sir,
stop?
I'm not getting. I'm
I'm
not getting. People are telling why you are giving antiviral like that. I'm not getting. This is a viral disease. Okay.
Yeah, this is a viral
Even though
disease.
whether it is working or not, what is the harm in giving antivirals?
Only
If you are
problem
giving in
is-
OPD, Ferrobac, like just for a URTA, why not this?
Only
It's a
problem is
life-threatening
not
illness, so you want to
everybody is
take
able
risk.
to afford it right now. That is the only problem.
That is the only
Affordability
thing,
is a
yes.
problem.
I
Yes,
think
sir.
as far as the use of favipiravir is concerned, I believe that this should not be discussed between the specialists. This is a drug for physicians. As soon as you feel or suspect COVID-19, you start favipiravir, because you see any antiviral, whether it is for your herpes, whether it's for meningitis, the maximum benefit that you can take is within 24 hours or 48 hours. Once that window period is gone, nobody knows whether the antiviral will work or not. So that is the first thing. Second thing, that most of the time what people are doing, they are following guidelines, and that is probably the compulsion in every hospital, that you give antibiotic, you give antiparasite, but nobody mentioned about favipiravir even in guidelines. But the dictum should be, as soon as you suspect, you start antiviral, because the maximum, even for Tamiflu, it has been recommended that earlier you start, the better are the results. But probably nobody is following it for favipiravir. They are waiting for the result of, COVID-19, RT-PCR, then also thinking whether to start or not. Even initially, the pill burden was so high that as soon as you ask the patient to take 9 tablets in the morning, 9 evening, this is almost fainted. So all these things are there, but I believe that the propaganda or the thing should be that it should be a armamentarium for physicians. Specialists should not touch this molecule. As soon as these things go to physician, they should start blindly. Then only probably it works the best.
Actually, we are doing it, sir. Most of the time, we are just getting sign also in OP basis, and we are using. So whenever we catch the pulse of the person, he is not going to do the test, and if we are confirmed, okay, it's going to be a COVID, and if we think he is not going to turn up, we immediately start, at least for 5 days. We are starting for 5 days at least.
Absolutely.
So
That's the protocol everywhere.
Yes, sir. And everywhere I think patients' acceptability has increased with the 400 milligram. Earlier with the 200 milligram, it was slightly difficult, but nowadays they are not having any problem. And most of the patients don't want to do the test. They are preferring CT instead of going for a test. And this is again landing up in problem. As I told, we have seen cases with the 100% involvement doing well, and persons with the 40% involvement doing very worse. So CT, if
May not
it
be.
is present, it can be taken as added value,
Yeah. So
but
CT has
we
to
do
be,
not rely on CT. And
CT
some
has to
of
be
the
evaluated in context with the clinical picture of the patient.
clinical picture.
The
Exactly.
markers, the risk factors, the accessibility, the understanding of the patient, whether the patient is able to manage them well at home. All these things should be considered in mind whenever we are trying to evaluate our CT rather than going by the digital scorings.
Yes. Yes.
And that most good point that 6-minute walk test is very important. Just by mere seeing saturation just for 3 seconds or 2 seconds is totally worthless. I think all pulmonologists actually should do this actually. This
Yeah, yeah.
6-minute
Even
walk
we
test.
are even Dr. Yuvraj, and we are even using it for discharge criteria as well.
Yeah,
So
yes, sir.
I have
Yeah.
in the last 6 months, 7 months, I must have stopped at least 25 patients getting discharged. And what we do is just keep them for a day or two more, look after them well, and they are fit for discharge. But if they fail a 6-minute walk test on discharge, they are not sent home. So what I was saying is COVID has got three main problems. We all know that. First is that you have a pneumonia, which is ARDS or a pneumonic patch. Second is you have a microvascular thrombosis. And third is you have this immune system problem. So for the pneumonia, you need to give antivirals. You need to look at your D-dimer and you need to think of giving low molecular weight heparin or some oral anticoagulant if at all you need to give it. And then if they do go into that immune phase, you need to think of steroids. I think apart from these three medications, everything else is supportive. Everything else is just basically good care, good pulmonology, good intensive care, good physician care, good GP level care. Anything, if you do properly, it will improve as long as you maintain these three things.
All right.
Agreed, sir. Agreed.
Agreed.
Dr. Bhagat,
Yes,
it
sir.
is 8 o'clock. I will be leaving at 8:30. So
Sure, sir. Sure. Dr.
Okay.
Yuvarajan, if you don't mind, can
Yeah,
we take
shortly. I will just
Yes, sir,
tell
yes, sir.
something about this case. This is actually 50-year-old.
Because Dr. Rahul Sharma's case is also being
Yeah,
scheduled.
just for one or two slides. No, one or two slides. This is just
Okay.
a different presentation. That's what I
Sure,
think.
sir, sure, sir. No
He
problem.
can just see. This is a 50-year-old female who presented to OPD with the complaints of ageusia, like loss of taste for 5 days, myalgia for 5 days, no history of fever, no history of cough, no history of dyspnea, history of loss of appetite. She's not having a feel to take her diet because of the loss of taste. Known diabetic patient on oral hypoglycemics is well controlled. And history of loss of taste for her son also 5 days back for the same symptom. He was tested positive for SARS-CoV-2 RT-PCR. He was advised for home isolation just 5 days back, and she had a contact with him, and she also got the similar symptom. On examination, unremarkable, no other signs were there. With positive contact history and typical symptoms, that is advised. I also advised for RT-PCR testing. It came as positive, and this was her CT thorax. So almost like a small patch was there. That's it. Otherwise, it is nothing is there. So investigations also almost like with the normal limits only. So patient was started on 5-paraben antibiotic supportive care. On day 7, she was symptomatically improved. So symptomatically improved in the sense that her taste also, she could feel the taste and all, and myalgia and all symptoms were improved. Interesting point, very important. As a comparative thing, his son actually have not consulted with me, and he was under home isolation with all the supportive care, vitamin C and all these things. But that fellow had as persistent symptoms for long duration, and he was having ageusia for at least minimum of 15 days to 20 days. And I came to know that after 20 days only, just felt that taste sensation for her. After starting 5-paraben on 7th day, she felt the taste. This is the personal experience from the patient side that I got, and this thing I want to share. That's it from my end. Thank you all. So COVID pneumonia with ageusia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Dr. Rahul Sharma, if you can start with your presentation, we will have discussion on that. Over to you, sir.
My presentation is very, very simple. I'll touch upon some of the very basic things that we often get confused when we are seeing these patients.
Sir, if you can just
And
make it full
most of the
screen.
time,
Sir, if you can just make it full screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, slide on the full screen mode.
most of the time we are
All
confused.
right.
Like CT is coming up a big way, and most of the time patients are coming up with CT rather than the COVID-19 report, and they say that what to do now. So most of the time CT has some kind of opacity, picture suspected of COVID-19. So how to deal with these patients? This is what I have learned with this patient. This patient was the patient that I was talking about, bronchoceal. So this patient is the wife of that patient. Both of them got contacted me in the OPD. She was a 51-year-old female, presented with fever for 3 days, troublesome dry cough, body aches, known case of diabetes, hypertension, more or less control, and she got this infection from her husband. And this is the protocol that we are following in our center. This is more or less we have adapted from ICMR form, but this is very, very easy that most of the time our junior doctor are working in a hospital and taking all these history. So I have made some changes in this so that everything can be written down in one go. But most of the time relatives are not there to, again reevaluate the history. So this was the form that is showing that the patient got COVID test confirmation on 8th. She has a history of diabetes for 5 years, hypertension diagnosed 3 years back, on oral hypoglycemics and antihypertensive. Along with this, she had cough. The fever was 101 degree Fahrenheit. She had body ache and lethargy, and there is some loss of taste which she was not very, very confident. And this was the X-ray that was done in OPD. So although she has the cough which is causing most of the trouble to this patient, it was a dry hacking cough, although she has no other history or allergy history in the past. So patient was very, very adamant that I'll get my CT also and my husband's CT also. Unfortunately, husband was desaturating, so we advised them admission, and she was also, by emotion that I'll also get admitted because my husband is getting admitted. This was the saturation, 98%, 97% in room air, pulse rate was okay, respiratory rate was good, and the X-ray appears to be normal. So this is a protocol or the form that I am filling in each and every patient. Probably in the later part of my journey, I'll try to reevaluate these data. And the CT scan was done for this patient, which again showed what we can see in each and every CT on day 3, day 4, some patchy peripheral ground glass opacities. What I call them that this is the evolving pneumonia. I don't know how more it can evolve. So this is the scenario that I'm talking about. 51-year-old female, diabetic, hypertensive, fever, cough, no shortness of breath, no desaturation. So this is the common prescription that we are getting in Ghaziabad and UP, because doxycycline and ivermectin is must for every patient who is getting COVID. I also starting these patients on favipiravir, vitamin C. So anybody in the option of giving steroid to this patient on day 3 in such a clinical scenario. The question is open to all the panelists.
See, sir, the role of steroids and this thing, actually it's a double-edged sword. Like whether we have to decide this patient, because steroids can worsen also, because as per the largest trial data, unnecessarily if you are giving a steroid without any indication, particularly those patients who are on diabetes mellitus, the one thing, whatever steroid you give, either it is dexamethasone or methylprednisolone, whatever steroid, it is going to cause glucose intolerance. You will get sugar level just boosted up, and it's very difficult for the physician to even to control the sugar even with insulin also, particularly with injectables.
Absolutely right.
I know. Yeah.
So I am not worried about sugar, because we will never able to control that sugar that we know 100% nowadays. So I am more concerned about whether we can stop this pneumonia at this particular stage by giving steroids or not.
Sir, steroid indication as per the guidelines, it is hypoxemia. But according to me, not only hypoxemia, I am just seeing the inflammatory marker also.
Yes.
Those patients who are having a higher basal inflammatory marker, who are more prone to get a severe damage in the lung, definitely steroid can help in that case. In other words, like if a inflammatory marker is very low and the patient is not having all signs like that, then you can wait without giving steroids. according
So
to.
absolutely, I fully agree with you that steroid should not be given for treating every pneumonia which is there in the city. You need to see the clinical profile as well as the inflammatory markers. So you can see in the bottom, 32, ferritin 132, LDH normal, IL-6 normal. So do you want to still give steroid to these patients? I don't know whether you will be able to see or not. I'll just read it out again. CRP 42, ESR 32, ferritin normal, LDH normal, IL-6 normal. Patient has a TLC of 3.72 and everything else appears normal to me. Pneumonia with high ESR markers. Favipiravir we are giving, there is no problem.
The patient hypoxic, Dr. Sharma?
No,
No,
97% on room air.
Answers your question.
So
No,
as
in
per guidelines, yes.
No.
The other thing that I am seeing for my patient whenever I am considering steroids, that the patient should have symptoms which is crossing the line of viral replication. Patient
Yes.
should be going into the category of day 5, day 6, or day 7. So we have not started this patient on steroid, but the wife got admitted with the husband, and this is the protocol that I am following in my wards for vital monitoring with my juniors: fever, cough, sputum, diarrhea, vomiting, breathlessness, headache, abdominal pain, throat pain, running nose, loss of taste, loss of smell. So first 2 days, patient was having fever, which subsided on day 3 of admission. Cough was persisting. The respiratory rate, the other vital parameters were almost the same every day. Fever was there for the first 2 days, and then it subsided. CT picture was suggestive of viral pneumonitis that is there in every CT. What to do next? So we are on day 3 now. There was no fever. Mild cough was there. The markers we can see again. I have repeated the marker. It is showing the decreasing trend. CRP is 32. ESR is 26. This was the time, unfortunately, the husband got shifted to ICU. The wife was alone and she was very panicked. What to do? So this is the real time scenario that I'm facing. The husband is still with me, admitted in the ICU, developing fibrosis. We almost tried everything to that patient, and the wife went home. So we have planned discharge to this patient. The wife was in the tears that I will not leave my husband. But this is the scenario. What do you want to do next in this such patients?
So the CRP is there, sir. CRP, like the repeat CRP, if you are doing, if it is doubling out on third day, definitely, like CRP is jumping like anything. If it is a decreasing trend, I think it's better like not to give steroid. If it is doubling the matter, yeah.
Absolutely. The other
Yeah.
thing is I am not a very good fan of ferritin, repeating ferritin.
Yeah.
Because what I am seeing that the ferritin is anyways high in every patient, even after 1 month.
True.
So I am doing it as a baseline for everyone just for the sake of guidelines, and I am not repeating it anytime further. D-dimer absolutely be required to see whether it is a inflammatory marker, as well as for the risk of DVTs and the prophylaxis that we are giving. This is again the case. So, but the sons too, they have 2 sons, and they were very reluctant whether to take her mother home or not. So they requested one more CT. So I'll come to that also. This was the CT on day 5. I'll make it more easier for everyone. I'll show a comparison here. Patient is on favipiravir, doxycycline, ivermectin, no steroid. This is the comparison. The left one is the newer CT and the right one is the older one. So we can see that the shadows has got denser now, right? So what do you want to do next? ESR CRP normal, no fever, no desaturation. Disease is a kind of consolidating in CT.
Sir, it's a period of evaluation, I think. It's a period of evaluation. Whatever CT is actually a photo only. Actually, the point rightly told by you during my presentation also, you actually clinically assess the patient. That is more important than seeing the X-ray radiology, because X-ray or CT, it shows that additional patch would have been there. That might have been there at the time only. Maybe for clinical radiological presentation, it will take some time. So I feel that just by seeing on the type of pattern and number of lobes involved, I think we should not jump. I should not be so aggressive, I feel.
Yes. So what I have learned over a period of time, because every day in the morning, 1 hour I'm sitting with my radiologist, because the room of radiologist and console is just next room cabin to me. Every day I am seeing that whatever ground glassing you are seeing on day 1,
Yeah.
it is getting consolidated in day
Yes.
5 or day 7,
True,
and
sir.
then they start resolving.
Yes.
So even if it is consolidating, you should not panic until unless there are new ground glassing in different areas which is progressing. So that is what I have learned with my personal experience. Seeing such patient, I am not worried, because most of the ground glassing, if it is consolidating, that is normal. But if I'm seeing new ground glassing appearing in newer areas, then I'm little more reluctant to discharge such patients. So that is what I am practicing in my center. So what we did, we discharged this patient on favipiravir. The question is how long, other supportive care, and since it is consolidated, do you still want to give steroid to these patients or not? This is again a very difficult question when we are discharging these patients. Saturation, everything is fine. Home isolation, strict monitoring, even mobile saturation monitoring with the help of their own pulse oximeter do the trick most of the time. So my two questions are how long to give favipiravir to such patients who are improving clinically, but radiologically, whether it is deteriorating or just the next phase of the disease, and do you want to give steroids?
It's better to give for at least the thing 2 weeks, like 14 days, 10 to 14. Why you want to take risks, sir, by giving only 7 days or 10 days? Because you have seen a radiology, we don't know how far the correlation is good, but still I want to be on the the duration on the higher side, not like within 7 days.
How
Even
do you
though the
monitor
patient,
once you are giving these things? Because as soon as you give favipiravir to every patient, everyone has Google to learn medicine, and they
Yeah.
come up with gouty arthritis, uric acid, SGOT, SGPT. How frequently do you recommend to monitor these parameters at home?
Sir, actually speaking, I don't think I have seen initially for starting fiber. Initially, I was very active to see this enzymes and all. But after that, I feel that it's a waste of time. You are sending the patient and putting more patients into risk, more guys into risk. Yeah,
Absolutely.
this patient will spread the disease.
Absolutely.
There is no need to repeat, sir. No problem is there.
Initially, we made 2 protocols at our center. Favipiravir protocol, in which we are every alternate day we are sending ESR, CRP, SGOT, SGPT, uric acids, and remdesivir protocol, in which we are not doing uric acid and doing SGAPT, SGOT, ESR, CRP, D-dimers. But over a period of time, maybe seeing 200, 300 patients, I have realized that nobody is actually crossing the toxicity level. Uric acid is never going beyond 10 or beyond 8. SGOTPT is just under 100. So I also stopped,
True.
monitoring these patients, and I'm very, very confident nowadays to prescribe favipiravir on OPD basis to my patients.
True.
This is what COVID learning is all about. Every day I'm learning something new to my patient, and steroid absolutely no to patient who is not in respiratory failure. So that is what I am practicing. I can take the views of other panelists also if they have anything differ or any more learning for me.
One point, sir. One
Dr.
point on the
Sharma.
CT. On the one point on the CT, just I want to add, sir. Like CT, whatever we are seeing as a ground glass, that actually rightly told by you that it's actually not a classically you cannot tell it as a pneumonia. Okay, that is progressing over to pneumonia, and we are seeing the evolution only at the end of the week. So just by seeing the evolution, we should not be very panic. See the clinical picture. As per the radiologist, my radiologist, and as per my opinion is concerned, if you see a crazy paving pattern, I have seen some crazy paving pattern. These patients are doing very bad because crazy paving pattern, as you know, that already fibrosed lung, over the fibrosed lung interstitial thickening, we are seeing ground glass. That's what we call it as a crazy paving. That means that already a chronic thing is there, and once again a new lesion is there over a old lesion. I feel that is one of the worst sign for a CT that you should not see. I feel. What do you think, sir?
This remembers me the last case that I have seen in the evening. The patient is from Northeast. We have given full dose of remdesivir. Patient came in respiratory failure, and now everything is crazy paving.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do after remdesivir and steroid to these patients. Whatever molecule are there, I'm getting a written consent from the relatives that these are all research molecule. Costlier one, I don't know whether they'll work or not. If you want to try, I'm happy to try these. What is the role of plasma? Anyone?
No, sir.
No, I think plasma.
No, sir.
So I have a few views on the whole thing. Plasma I will come later, but favipiravir, duration of favipiravir. I think it is in our hand to actually give the complete 2 weeks duration. If we start cutting corners by saying 7 days, 10 days because clinical improvement, imagine what other specialists, which is the physicians and the GPs would do. They would start giving it for 3 days as a part of their, they will buy a 21-day pack, 14-day pack and give 3 days tablets and say कि अभी 3 दिन में अच्छा हो जाएगा करके. So that's not something which we should do. We should promote it only as a 2 week course.
Yes.
There is probably some science behind that right now. Okay.
And the other thing is starting of favipiravir, when to start.
So for,
That
yeah,
is
so
very important.
very, very important. Earlier the better. Earlier the better. Best results within the first 3 days if you start. Maybe up to 5 days. After 5 days, it's questionable whether to start it or not because you're probably crossing out the border. Secondly, about plasma. I think plasma again, the conceptually it is same. If you are thinking of remdesivir, think of plasma at the same time. And if you look at the Mayo Clinic protocol, if you look at the other protocols which have basically shown some positive results, they are talking about giving plasma in the first few days of illness. Do not wait till they become moderately sick. You give them when they are mild. That means that patient who is mild and admitted in your hospital, offer plasma to them. That's the time when it would actually help them. Unfortunately, all the trials, if you see, average duration of plasma therapy is 2 days, but that duration was started only on the 12th day or 10th day of the therapy. It completely defeats the purpose. The viral replication has stopped. So how does it help? I don't know. So if you really want
desperate measure that people are using by
Yes.
utilizing plasma therapy, so
Yeah.
that's why probably the results are not best. And even in Delhi NCR region, what happens that when any VIP patient got sick, they get plasma, and then whole of the patient's relatives are after us that why you are not giving plasma to our patients. So that
all VIPs who get admitted to my hospital, I actually have this fun conversation with them because this is the question which comes up to us: why are you not giving plasma? And I keep on telling them, had you come to me on first day, not before getting complicated, I would have offered you plasma. Unfortunately, now is not the time to offer you plasma. And another thing, which you mentioned, that which molecule to give after having same crazy paving pattern and everything. Problem is that none of these molecules are substitute to our good care. So continue with your high flow nasal cannula or your good intensive care, ward level care, and give them time. From our SARS theory data which we have, from our H1N1 data which we have, many of these patients will actually get reasonably better, except the ones who have this crazy paving pattern. Most of these GGOs and the pneumonia and the consolidation will actually get better, hopefully in 6 to 8 months time, and their reasonable function would return to them. However, the crazy paving is, I agree, it's already fibrosis, because what we are calling fibrosis is the wrong terminology. We will have to probably change the terminology now. Everybody calls hypoxia, persistent hypoxia at 3 weeks as fibrosis. And then 2 months down the track, these patients are walking in our hospital in my OPD and talking to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
So is it fibrosis? It's not fibrosis.
Yes, anyone for antifibrotic for such crazy.
Yeah, that is totally a stupid thing.
Yes.
I don't know, sir. Actually, why I'm telling, because see, I feel, sir, like antifibrotic is approved only for progressive fibrosis, and how far everyone is justified in giving a antifibrotic agent. How you know that this COVID pneumonia will be a progressive fibrosis? It is all because of the area of involvement. Maybe, sir, like maybe if a lot of lobes are involved, like almost like if you see CT is almost 90% involved, the patient was catched from the terminal illness, like after some 20 days or 30 days and from ICU. Maybe some they are using, but now also I'm not convinced to use antifibrotic agents because we are not very sure that this fibrosis is a progressive one.
What I have learned again with my radiologist, I'm seeing all these CT on a regular basis, that people who are developing some kind of traction bronchitis, these are the patients who are not doing good even on follow-ups. They have some kind of disease left behind. So but I have no experience whether by giving these patients antifibrotic in the early part of the disease, make some changes in the natural course of the disease. But these are probably the patients who are having persistent fibrosis or lung lesions when I am following these patients up in the OPDs also. And all these ground glassing and everything goes away with steroids and everything else. But when they have any kind of bronchitis in the early part or during the natural course of the disease, these are the findings that is persisting in these patients.
Sir, this point is right, sir. Like what we are telling, The one patient I was just discussing that the bullous lung disease after COPD just at that time. So this patient was having, I have started, even they have asked, physician have asked, they have agreed for this pirfenidone because the traction bronchiolitis was there, as you are telling. Like what we see as a probable case of IPF, similar finding, traction bronchiectasis in the areas where consolidation or pneumonia was there. And there are some fibrosis also. The pattern was somewhat, similar to what we see in IPF, somewhat, not like classical. So that case, I have agreed. Okay, you can start this pirfenidone because nobody knows that whether pirfenidone is going to improve, lung function of this post-COVID sequelae. But I've just told them we have to see that whether it works or not.
The patients you would want to give longer steroids at home as well. Rather than continue pirfenidone, maybe you can actually continue longer course of steroid, oral steroid.
We are following. If the patient has persistent pneumonia, they are negative for RT-PCRs. Oxygen requirement is minimal or completely gone, but the CT picture or the X-ray picture is still showing some kind of ground glassing consolidations. Then, and most of the patients are not ready to be in the hospital once the COVID report is negative. So we are discharging these patients on steroid with antibiotic covers to see how they behave in the OPD. And most of them, these people are doing good with steroids only. Hardly any patient is on antifibrotic still now.
Absolutely.
The same thing, sir. Same thing. The organizing pneumonia pattern, if you are seeing in a CT, like you can see before COVID era. So whatever you are seeing reverse halo sign, whatever you are seeing like a typical organizing pneumonia, what we are doing, sir? We are just ruling out all the other infections. We are ruling out all the CTDs, underlying diseases. We label it as COP and then we put on steroids. The same thing, like this patient, and when RT-PCR is negative, having a classical picture of organizing pneumonia, I feel that tapering dose of steroid will work good. So I am also doing that, tapering dose of steroids for them.
How high steroids are you giving? What is the dose that you are giving or discharging your patient?
Sir, not like very higher dose because already these patients in ICU already might have received IV steroids. So maybe oral steroid, if you are giving equivalent to maybe methylprednisolone, I'm preferring. Maybe 32 milligram I'll start and then slowly I'll taper and then I'll keep at a low dose. Maybe depending on the response. So normally around 6 months we'll give for COP. Maybe for this, actually, this is not a COP, actually. Picture is like a COP, but this is organizing pneumonia.
Very fast with these steroids, very fast. It is not taking 6 months. Because most of our patients are in follow-up of 2-3 months and the pneumonia
they are good, sir. Yes, sir.
Clear. Some ground glassing is left behind, which I don't know whether it will go away or not. But everything is fine with steroids, low-dose steroids also.
Yes, sir.
Actually, we are selecting patients on the basis of clinical. While discharging, if the patient is hypoxic still, or if the patient is not is having more symptoms, and definitely we are starting steroids for them, and we are giving them for a longer period of time, over 1 month, and we are tapering as that told. We started with 32, then 16, then 8, then 4, and after 4 weeks we are asking them to come. And when patient, as that told, the 6 minutes walk test, or patient feels better. No, I am not going to be immobilized even though I am from ICU. I will go to toilet by myself. The patient stays, and after coming from bathroom, if their SpO2 is normal, and those patients are doing well, and in spite of the CT having 100% or 95% or 92%, at the time of discharge, these patients are not having much of the symptoms or CT findings in the follow-up after 2 months. But those patients who are having symptoms at the time of discharge, mild discharge, we want to go, we will do in home like that. And even though we are starting on steroids, these patients coming up with much difficulty later also. And we have some not very statistically significant, but I have more than 10 to 12 patients still having some symptoms, even after 3 months or 4 months. I think open for discussion.
Yeah.
This was day 12 of my patient, happy ending, saturation 98%, afebrile, no walk desaturation, ESR, CRP came down to normal, D-dimer normal, RT-PCR was negative on day 14. And the wife is doing very, very good, but unfortunately the husband is still with me in the ICU. He's doing good. We are using, I think 3 to 4 liters of oxygen still. This patient was also started on some kind of antifibrotic with second opinion because once the patient takes some second opinion, there is nothing more to add by anyone else. So they can add anything and everything they want to add. And the relatives were also very, very keen. Let's start this also. They want to do everything to their patient. Mind you, we have started cytoswab also to that patient, and it also showed some remarkable recovery. But this is what we are doing on day basis and learning on day basis.
So what dose you are giving, sir? Firpinodone, what dose you are preferring for that case?
So I started with Firpinodone already when the patient took second opinion. So the other person started the patient on Cindev, Nintedanib. So we have started the patient on Cindev now.
Okay.
Let's see, because this is not a short-term therapy that we'll see the response in few days.
Yes.
It will take minimum 6 weeks. But as I also have nothing to offer more than this. I go by the patient's choice.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for your patience listening, and I'm very, very happy if someone or all of you can give comments and any kind of input to the presentation. Thank you very much.
I want to know how many of us have failed with FaviFlu.
Oh yes, that is again a very, very important question. If you allow, I'll answer this question first. So most of the time we are failing when we are starting it late. So most of the time, what happens that the patient is coming to us at day 5, 6, 7, not desaturating, saturation is okay. We feel that let's start with Favipiravir, and after day 3, the patient is started desaturating. That is what I have observed in my practice. If the patient is coming after 5, 6 days, there is no role of giving Favipiravir. Even if the patient is not desaturating, I am trying to convince them that take Remdesivir, because this is the only drug that can actually, reversing the course. Otherwise, late part, everything is failing. Every Favipiravir is failing if you are giving it late. And the blame goes to the molecule, not to the physician who is treating the patient,
I agree.
Ma'am, actually, I also want to add something. Definitely, still, most of us are in learning phase only as far as COVID is concerned. I can't say not only Favipiravir, none of the things is 100% sure, even Remdesivir. And we have seen cases in the earlier part of the disease when the markers is not there, just for comorbidities when they got admitted. And I can say 3 to 4 patients whom we started on Favipiravir failed miserably in spite of starting the drug in the earlier part of the disease, and in spite of all markers are normal. And I don't want to stop with this Favipiravir. We have started with Remdesivir for some of the patients with a comorbid condition. Recently only they have undergone CABG. So HbA1c is high, CT is normal, CT scoring is normal, CRP is normal, and those patients we started on Remdesivir from the day 1 of admission, and that patient has got admitted within 3rd day of symptoms. In spite of that, patient had hypoxia on exactly 9th day, and we started with the pulse steroid therapy, and we recommended tocilizumab 1 dose for them, because nowadays in our center we stopped using 2nd dose of tocilizumab because most of the patients are going for failure with the sepsis. So we started with just 1 dose of tocilizumab, and we intubated the patient also. Okay, and we lost the patient. That is the other thing. But these type of things happen not only with the Favipiravir, but also with the Remdesivir, and we don't know why it is happening.
But the only thing is that Favipiravir you are giving in the OPD, and that's why it is getting more of the negative publicity that you have already started and the patient is get hospitalized. And Remdesivir and everything else is giving in the hospital. So they feel that I am already sick, or the relative feel that the patient is already sick. Even if it is failing, they accept this. That is probably the reason why this molecule is getting so much of criticism as compared to other molecules.
That's why
But yes, it is again not 100% proof that you start the patient on day 1 to Favipiravir and the patient will not progress.
Only 2 things which is 100% surety is those patients who are on hypoxia or severe disease, immobilization of the patient and awake proning, they are doing wonders. I always used to convey this message to my juniors and who are COVID warriors. You please do that. And we are seeing a remarkable response. And those patients who are cooperating on these things are doing wonders. those patients who are
We are getting more time. We are giving more time by proning them to, you know, to combat the disease and the response of the treatment as well as immune factor. Because proning is providing us, we are buying more time with proning. That is probably the best.
And one more query, like Dr. Apan Raj had mentioned that without confirming COVID, in a probable case of COVID, people who are not really in for taking their RT-PCR, you are giving, but I would be little.
No, in that case,
Because you have a consent form, you are medical legally
yes.
not. Even if I know, I'm very sure patients
Absolutely.
COVID.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that
In that case, doxy-ivermectin I'm giving.
Because this COVID is now not a pandemic. Everyone is on our head. Why my patient is not improving? I'm giving
Right.
everything.
It all depends on the area where you are practicing. Here,
That's right. I do it in Delhi. I'm very
here
sure.
people are very much fearing to do the test. So we want to do. They want all treatment, ma'am, but they don't want RT-PCR. And we have seen
I
patients
agree with you, sir.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
trend
who
is
have got
similar.
admitted, who have got remdesivir, who have got tocilizumab, and they don't want to do the test till they are getting discharged because of some marriage, something like that. And we have one couple. They got admitted, they got treated with remdesivir, and they got discharged, and they didn't do the test. They didn't give consent. They didn't give other consent.
I think as far as remdesivir is concerned,
Problem.
indication shows that you can give it in on suspicion also. But the same indication I am not able to find out for favipiravir. So the
Yes.
concern is more with favipiravir, but for remdesivir and not for tocilizumab, only for remdesivir, you can give on suspect also.
Yes, and remdesivir
Yes.
they approve for any saturation now. Even it is 98, 99, the approval has come, which is not the case with other things.
No,
So in that case, doxycycline ivermectin I'm giving, because somebody should not ask na, like why you have started with RT-PCR negative. They will sue you sometimes also. It depends upon the city where you are practicing.
So the trick that I am following, if I feel that my patient has any kind of viral illness, I'll start favipiravir and write down RT-PCR. Whether you get it done or not, that is your choice.
We will do all patients will write.
Yes.
Do RT-PCR, home quarantine, everything.
If something happened to patient, it is because of COVID that he has not tested.
That's right.
I think it is a wonderful discussion with all of you.
Yeah,
guys.
yeah. Thank you, sir. If at all, if there are no questions, we with all your permission, sir, we can conclude the session.
Yes, thank you.
Right. All right. So thank you so much, everyone. On behalf of my entire organization, I would like to thank our two speakers, Dr. Yuvarajan sir, Dr. Rahul Sharma sir, for that excellent 2 cases from you and 1 case from Dr. Rahul Sharma sir, and also our panelists, Dr. Apan Raj, Dr. Pooja Khosla ma'am, and Dr. Rahul, who has just left at 8:30. It was an excellent presentation from the practical aspect, like what is the current scenario, what the theory says, and what is actually the practical things happening, which was all the motto of this case-based discussion rather than having a pure theoretical discussion. So with this, I conclude that we will end the session, and thank you so much everyone for your participation. And to the audience also who has participated, thank you so much for your patient listening and all the questions and all. Thank you so much, sir.
Very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Talking to you all. Thank you very much. Stay safe.